Assalamualaikum and a good day to our respected lecturer, Ustaz Muhammad Syauqi bin Mat Zahir. We hope this video reaches to you with the best condition of health. So, as for our topic, we will discuss about one of the deviant teaching, which is Anti-Hadith Movement. But before we further ado, allow us to introduce ourselves first. So, my name is Nadhirah binti Muhammad Najmuddin and my metric number is 213153. Along with me, my grade members are
Hello, Assalamualaikum. My name is Nadhirah binti Izaham. I'm from section 419 and my metric number is 214641.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nadhirah binti Reading with metric number 21382.
Now, let's take a look for the general overview of the topic. From an Islamic perspective, there are two major groups of sources of Sharia. First, primary sources, and second, secondary sources. In this way, the Prophet Sunnah is regarded as the second most important source of Sharia after the Quran. Despite that, some groups argue that the Quran is more than sufficient as a guide in life in which it contains every necessary law and regulation of the Sharia, as they reject the Hadith as a source of legal theology. This group is known as the Quraniyun or the Quranic congregation, which is a modern anti-Hadith movement. An indication of a refusal of Hadith has already occurred in the early centuries as it first appeared in the times of the companion of the Prophet ﷺ, and it was the conclusion of the Orientalists in the early 19th century that led to the progression of such belief by Muslims in other parts of the world.
Next, the objective. Firstly, the objective is to identify the anti-hadith movement in Malaysia. Second, to identify the main characteristic of the teaching that lead to its pronouncement as heretical. Lastly, to justify the characteristic of the teaching to either religious liberalism or religious pluralism.
So, today we will introduce to you the anti-hadith movement and present to you about the historical of the existence of anti-sunnah in Malaysia. Second, the main features of the teaching that led to it being declared heretical. And lastly, the relatable anti-hadith with religious liberalism. Historical background of anti-hadith movement in Malaysia. Anti-hadith teaching in Malaysia started in 1984 by an eminent thinker, Kasim Ahmad, a founder of the People's Socialist Party of Malaysia. Kasim Ahmad, who looked up highly on the work of Dr. Rashad Khalifah about his opposition to the Hadith and the finding of the Code 19, has influenced Kasim Ahmad. Kasim Ahmad tried to prove his assumption that Hadith is a false teaching associated with the Prophet Muhammad SAW, with wrote a book entitled Hadith a Re-Examination and published it on May 1986. However, the controversial book was later banned on 10 July 1986 as the book came with the message which was denied the Hadith in total. Afterwards, he formed Jemaah Al-Quran Malaysia, JAM, with his objective to call Muslims in Malaysia and throws out the work back to the teachings of God, which is the final revelation, as they are putting forward the theory that the teachings of Islam are sufficient to be guided only by the Quran and scientific study through reason.
Next, I would like to talk about the three main characteristics of the teaching that lead to its pronouncement as heretical. Firstly, when trusting the hadith as a source of law is shirk. The anti-hadith movement claims that believing the hadith as a source of Islamic law is shirk. They say that Allah Himself described it as such. For them, the Quran is the only source of knowledge in Islam, and they only follow the teachings of the Quran. Now it is evident that Allah has ordered all men to obey the Prophet Muhammad in all his words and deeds. If they reject the hadith as a source of law, they choose not to believe in the Prophet Muhammad and the Quran. Next, when believing the leadership of the Prophet as a human being differs from his leadership as a prophet. This ideology further negatively impacts the Muslim community, as in the people's mind, Prophet and Apostle are the people chosen to be God's messenger to lead and guide human onto the right path. It is obvious that the Prophet and Apostle are exemplary leaders and historical figures in human civilization. In a more specific context, the Prophet Muhammad Muhammad was the last prophet and head of the prophets, and of course had a distinctive position, especially in leadership matters. As a superior leader, his life and personage are often highlighted by many writers from ancient times to the present, either by Islamic or non-Muslim scholars.
Lastly, when rejecting the Qada and Qadar, fate and destiny, the Anti-Hadith Movement rejects the belief in Qada and Qadar, preordained predestination, which is one of the essential pillars of the faith. This is because the Qada and Qadar are stated in the Hadith and are considered contrary to what is found in the Quran. Among the principles of the Aqidah held by the Muslims that the Anti-Hadith Movement has criticized is the belief in Qada and Qadar. They had always tried to criticize the Muslim and try to cast doubt on it, especially on those who were weak in faith. When in a bad or unprofitable situation, the Quran attributes it to the Muslims' attitude towards Qada and Qadar.
The three main characteristics above demonstrate that the anti-hadith movement leaned toward religious liberalism. Firstly, liberalization of views and rationale toward the hadith. They consider the interpretation of the Quran in hadith to be limited to the era. The change of era and modernity have provided anti-hadith with a platform to establish hadith as historical teachings. The same can be applied to the claim that hadiths are merely additional to the teaching of the Quran. Moreover, they conclude that many hadiths include lessons from the already revised Taurat, such as the death penalty for deviants, the stoning to death of adulterers, and so on. In addition, anti-hadith movement believes that hadiths are the root cause of Muslim disintegration and decline, rather than blaming Prophet Muhammad SAW for negligence towards the formation of hadiths after the passing of the hadith. Therefore, they said that any hadith that contradict the Quran should be dismissed and that hadiths incorporate irrational ideas in Islamic doctrine. They also attack from the standpoint of history and hadiths by claiming that the duration of time that hadiths have been recorded exposes the inadequacy of the transmission and text. Secondly, liberalization in regards to criticism towards the Prophet Muhammad SAW includes perceiving Prophet as a fortune teller due to his ability to perform miracles in a number of incidents. Additionally, they claim that the miracles of Prophet Muhammad SAW were denied in Quran. According to their logic, no apostles, scholars, or pious people can request lighter punishments on sinners. Again, anti-hadith movement claim that the Prophet's power is only limited to the Quran and that it is only helpful in delivering to society. They also claim the prohibition in distinguishing the status of Prophet Muhammad SAW with the other apostles as their perception of the apostles as ordinary people who may make mistakes. Due to the over-dependency on the Prophet Muhammad SAW, society has over-worshipped him and the companions, lagging behind modernization. By contrast, Prophet was accused of being flawed. Thus, he could not become a role model and spread goodness to others. In conclusion, apart from the insignificant anti-hadith belief after Prophet Muhammad SAW death, anti-hadith ideology may mostly be traced to Western scholars who arrived in Muslim nations during colonialism during the 19th and 20th centuries. On this occasion, the Quran is suspicious of counting on the Sunnah as the source of shirk is unjustified and irrational. It is because Allah has highlighted the importance of referring to the Messenger and surrendering and submitting to Allah SAW alone. Besides, Allah Himself has made the obedience toward the Messenger obligatory upon Muslims and declared that the loyalty toward the Messenger is equal to the obedience to him. As a result, those who follow the Sunnah in conjunction with the Quran as a source of Islamic law are not considered mushrik, but they obey the Prophet Muhammad SAW. It is hoped that the authorities will be able to eradicate the anti-hadith movement from expanding their misguided understanding among the Muslim community in Malaysia. Attached here is a list of references that we have used throughout doing this assignment. Our trio presentation has come to an end. That's all we have to say. Thank you very much.